less than the size of this desktop here. And to think that people used to live with that much space for all their clothing, and we're perfectly happy. So what's happened to our culture to allow us to expand and depend so much on this materialistic material acquisition that we rely on? This is a shot, I pulled this off the internet, of pesticide, what happens as a result of chemical pesticide application. Years back, we took some of our staff members on a tour of a cotton farm in California. It was both conventional cotton farm and an organic cotton farm, and they spoke to the farm workers and learned about all the health issues, and that really set us on our path towards organic. This picture of Rana Plaza, very famous event from a few years back. And while we don't manufacture anything, we have no connection whatsoever as a business to Bangladesh, this has really shook the industry up and made us all look again at what we've been doing all these years to address human issues in our supply chain. As I mentioned, having been with the company for 23 years, I'd say 19 of those years we've had a very specific program around human rights in our factories. And honestly, when I look at the progress that we've made, it's hard to find real progress. A lot of the issues that existed 19 years ago still exist today on the human side in the factories. So this was a wake-up call to all of us. This is a woman that is in our supply chain. She's in a small community outside of Calcutta. And she's spinning thread that's eventually going to go on that wheel and eventually make its way to a weaving loom. And I put it up there because she is several layers away from our company. We provide orders to a vendor who then provides orders to a supplier in India who then provides orders to like a master weaver who then gives out the work. And what's our responsibility to this woman and hundreds of others like her who do the same thing in our supply chain? And this man is in our supply chain as well. He's a silkworm farmer, and he's outside of Shanghai. And again, we don't have a direct relationship to him, but our product is sourced from his farm, a lot of our products. So, what is our responsibility towards him as well? So in the year 2012, 5 years ago, sorry, Eileen made a very important trip. She went and visited two parts of our supply chain. She visited our Los Angeles suppliers and our China suppliers. It's the first time she had done that. And she came back completely changed. She came back and told us about the things she had learned and the things she had heard and how she felt we needed to ramp up our work in the area of sustainability. And when I say sustainability, I mean environmental and social, both. She was particularly struck with the water crisis issue, but holistically, she felt like we really needed to pick it up. So we decided that we needed to change how we were working on this in the company. It was no longer good enough to let this work be owned by my team and to try to make connections where we could throughout the company. So we hired a consultant, this woman who's sitting on the bench here. Her name is Sarah Schley. She's a really wonderful friend of ours. And she is a systems thinker. And she had us put together the system of the clothing. We had to think what that meant. And we decided we would bring together, it was about 22 key thinkers and leaders that represented the system of getting the clothing made in our company. So from design through to manufacturing, product development, and a couple of teams in between, including my team. Eileen is there. She's sitting on the bench back there next to the woman in white with her hand up. And we went off-site. We went to a Buddhist retreat for 3 days in a little north of where we're based. We're based, by the way, in the Hudson Valley in New York. And what we did during those 3 days changed everything for us. We went and sat in the woods and we journaled and we visioned what we wanted for ourselves personally and our families on this planet. And then we came back together and we collaborated on a unified vision. What did we want for our company in the future? What was the year 2020 going to look like for us in the year 2050? And after 3 days, we had come together around this new vision. And some of you who may have looked at our website know that we now call that vision 2020. Now again, this was in 2013 when we had this offsite, so it's been 3 years. And this group of people now, what we've done is we've whittled the group down a little bit, but we have continued to meet. We call this team our Sustainability Design Team. We meet once a month for a full day. It's a leader of our design team, a leader in our business operations team, a leader of our manufacturing and product development team, a few people from my team, internal communications, brand communications, our creative officers. We meet for a full day once a month. We've been doing this for 3 years, and once a week for an hour on the telephone in order to stay connected and make sure that together we're pushing sustainability forward. So one of the things that happened at that offsite was, I mentioned Sarah came from a systems thinking background. She taught us how to draw system maps, and I'm not going to try to explain this whole thing to you, but what I will say is we decided that we needed to map why our carbon footprint was so high as a company. So this was something we tried to take on at that offsite. This went on, it ended up being a months-long task because it was so complicated. And what we ended up doing was mapping how orders were placed. This brown part in the middle is the sales, basically our sales processes. Up there, the pink is our design team, or design processes. So the designs get made and they get fed into the sales team. And you can tell there's a lot of arrows going every which direction. And that represents some of the repetition in our process and the redundancy and a little bit of chaos. And over on the right, we've got the red and the green are in our supply chain. And you can see that in an attempt to map our carbon footprint, we ended up accidentally mapping impacts on the social side as well. We were mapping sort of the turmoil inside our processes and recognizing that our own lack of efficiency was actually causing some of these issues in our supply chain that we had been working for 19 years to try to eradicate. Overtime, unwarranted overtime, transparency issues, excessive hours, working hours, and this map became kind of the basis for a whole lot of other work that has since grown, evolved to this day. So we now have a core to our strategic work in the company right now is a huge effort to unpack these processes and create more time for our supply chain to get things done the right way, the ethical way, a way that is defined by simplicity and efficiency. And it will, of course, help reduce our carbon footprint because now we'll be able to ship things by sea instead of air, which is what this map started to tease apart. So this whole work has been very eye-opening for us. So I mentioned Vision 2020, and these are the 8 buckets of goals that we identified. The 4 on the environmental side are fairly straightforward: materials, chemistry, carbon, and water. Largely focused on our product, but not entirely. There's certainly elements related to our facilities, our energy use, et cetera. And on the social side, somewhat unusual ones. The very first one, conscious business practices, is looking at ourselves and how, like I just described, how are the processes that we use within our company impacting our supply chain, impacting our suppliers' ability to do the right thing. Fair wages and benefits, workers' voice, and worker and community happiness are the other elements. How are we doing? So this is a slide hot off the press as of Friday, showing all the way through 2016 how our eco-materials have grown in ratio to everything else in our product mix. You can tell that since 2013, when we started this work, there was a huge jump, and it has continued to go forward. This is very, very exciting for us. And one of the tools that is key to this, I think for some of you who are more data-oriented, I brought this in, is something we call the material ranking tool. And this tool developed in partnership with Shona Quinn, who's a former industrial ecology student here. She's on my team. And in partnership with the design team and an external consultant as well. This tool, for the first time, enables us to quantify the impact, environmental impact of a blended fabric. So it's not just a single fiber like a cotton or a wool, but it looks at the actual blends and the ratios of the blends and gives us a score based on the fibers, how they were grown and whether they're organic or not, and then how what the dyeing process was like. Was it certified dyeing or not? And it rolls it up into a single score. And it helps the designers make decisions about whether to move forward with a certain fabric or maybe shift in order to keep our score as high as possible. Another way to look at it is through this graph, which looks at the relative volume of those fabrics. The threshold is 3.8, so anything to the right of this arrow makes it into the eco-materials category. Anything to the left means it still has some work to do. So it's another way of looking at this information. It gives the designers like really logical and data-based tools for decision making. And it lets us know where we still have work to do. As you can tell, there's a lot of fabrics there that need to be pushed across the line. So in conjunction with becoming a certified B Corporation a year ago, we became a so-called triple bottom line company, but in true Eileen Fisher fashion, because we never do anything according to the book, we became a quadruple bottom line company. So we have our, there are a lot of question marks on this slide, basically, because we haven't figured it all out yet. We know we have financial goals. That's easy. We can measure our financial success. We've always been able to do that. We now have that materials ranking tool, which will tell us how well we're doing in terms of our materials. So that's the eco part. And we have two social legs of the scorecard, one internal and one external. So on the internal side, which is our own employees, we want to be able to measure employee well-being. And that's a holistic look at well-being. How are employees feeling about their own financial situation, how happy they are at work, how happy they are at home, lots of things, their health, of course. So we're working on integrating a tool within the company to allow us to take a pulse of how our employees are doing. That will happen sometime this year. And then on the external side, we're looking at our supply chain. This goes back to those 4 social riverbanks, or the Vision 2020 goals. Livelihood ranking tool. How well are the workers in our supply chain doing in terms of wages, happiness, et cetera? We hope to have measures for that available by mid-year this year as well. So at some point this year, all 4 scorecard measures will be in place, and we'll be able to begin to report internally, and I hope externally as well. For those who are interested on the social side, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about why fair wages is one of our goals, because a lot of people, our own employees included, were surprised to find out that we hadn't actually achieved our fair wage goals. Here we've been working in our factories on human rights for almost 2 decades, and we still claim fair wages and benefits as one of our 4 goals for Vision 2020. This very simplified diagram comes from the Fairware Foundation, which is a European foundation or organization that looks at human rights issues in supply chain. And the basic idea here is that at every new point along the journey, the path of a product from factory to landing in our distribution center, there's a multiplier effect. So the original cost, let's say it costs $6 to make something in a factory, just pulling that out of, it gets doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled again until it reaches our distribution center and ultimately, again, to our customer. So the idea here is, if you just were taking the top 2 lines, if you were to, how do I explain this very quickly, very easily? Just increase the labor by $1.50, basically, to create these leggings. If you were simply to add that $1.50, it's a very negligible price at the end for the customer. But because of that multiplier effect, you add it, and then you double, and you double, and you double, more or less, and you get an astronomical price, which is actually unaffordable by our customer. This is a classic way of pricing things in the supply chain, which is why a classic, simply raising wages in a factory doesn't solve the problem, because if you, in terms of trying to achieve our fair wage goals, if you raise the wage, it becomes too expensive because of this. Everybody along the way, the vendor, there could be more than one supplier in between the vendor and the original supplier. A lot of middlemen along the way, and every single one wants to take a little bit of the profitability. So we're trying to figure out a new model that might work for us to remove the additional cost of fair wages from what we call the FOB, freight on board, final cost of that item, so that it doesn't become too expensive when it gets to our customer. Yes, a quick question.
I don't know if we're allowed to ask questions.
If it's a clarifying question, and if it's a discussion question, I'll take it at the end.
Okay. I guess I have a question again.
So I will call on you first, okay? Hold on, write your question down and don't forget it, okay? This is, I could go in more on this, but I just want to give you a taste of it, and you know, we can talk more about it later. So none of this would be successful if our customer didn't buy our clothes, right? By and large, we have been a consistently profitable company since we were founded. Lately, it's been a little tougher because the retail industry is quite suffering quite a bit, you know, thanks to some very large online retailers in part, and fast fashion, which is another challenge. So in 2009, we started a clothing take-back program, which was one way to engage our customers in this idea of sustainability, and was a way for us to begin to think about building a new business model based on our old clothing, our perfectly fine, good quality, you know, not attached to trend kind of clothing that people can wear for years and years and years. But people's tastes change, their sizes change, whatever. So we started asking our customers to bring their clothes back, and we were giving them a little bit of an incentive, a financial incentive. And this was one of the early posters we put in the stores. We'd like our clothes back now, thanks very much. And the funny story behind that is we had this, so it was hanging in the big window in the front of every one of our stores. And in Soho in New York City, one of the store managers across the street from a different store came running breathless across the street and came into the store and asked if somebody had stolen, if we'd been shoplifted. So, you know, mixed message. I guess, you know, maybe it caught his attention. Maybe the point is, our customers did start bringing clothes back, which was quite exciting. To date, we've now received about 700,000 units, which, you know, over 6-7 years may not seem like a lot, but only half of that we've been able to resell. Half of it has been warehoused, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. We've also attempted some other kinds of communication, you know, trying to draw our customer in, because again, by and large, our customer hasn't totally been so interested in this side of our company. They come in because they want great clothes. They come in because they want a great fit. They come in because they love the fabrics. So we went through a period where we had this ampersand symbol, and anytime a customer saw that, she knew she could get a little more information that talked about the values. So in this case, it's a fair trade sweater. Skips the chemicals. So, okay, so naturally dyed. And I think it had some moderate success. You can still see a lot of this information on our website. 2 years ago, we decided to really go for it. And we went with this No Excuses campaign. It was almost exactly 2 years ago. It was kind of the middle of the winter. And I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago we had it was a very snowy, blizzardy kind of year, and we came out with this lovely white springtime outfit in February. And for whatever reason, it didn't sell very well. But this was the first real major claim we made in public about our new bold values. And because the sales didn't follow, we pulled back a little bit, for better or for worse. This past fall, we had Your Choice Has Power, and you can read into it what you want. This was around September, October. We had a lot of support for this ad, but also a lot of detractors. It's very interesting to read the responses on Facebook. And we've had the Eileen Fisher Behind the Label as another attempt to try to rein our customers in a bit. And this, you're getting a sneak preview with this one. This is the ad that's going to be launching our Conscious Consumerism year. This will be out in February. What if you lived with less? So now we're starting to talk about this kind of, do you really need 20 sweaters? Can you just buy one great, yummy sweater that you'll really take care of and it will last you 5 or 10 years? And if you think about the number of wearings per dollar, as somebody on my team likes to talk about, maybe you'll actually get a better buy out of it than buying, 20 sweaters at a fast fashion retailer. So this is another take on sustainability, another way for us to try to lead our customers in. This is what you would see if you came to our showroom, which is in downtown New York City. And on the floor, we have these words pressed in. It's the first thing our visitors walk over when they come in. So again, another way to kind of remind. It's all about reminding and trying to hit people from all different angles. Very exciting for us to see, again, the growth of our organic and et cetera. Spring always has more organic and certified dyeing because of the kinds of fabrics we tend to make in the spring. Biggest eco season ever, I love that. So here I'm gonna, this is, okay. I mentioned that we've been taking back our clothes, and that effort's been called Green Eileen all these years, and we're about to go through a name change. It's going to be called Fisher Found now. So this is a very feeble PowerPoint slide. I made it. I'm just claiming that right now. We have, so the customers can bring the clothes back to any Eileen Fisher store. We have about 60 stores. The only place, this doesn't work in the UK or Canada yet, but in the US, they can bring back any clothes to any store, and only Eileen Fisher clothes. And we have 2 recycling centers, one in Irvington, New York, in Westchester County, where we're based, and one in Seattle. So everything's sorted. And then we now have 4 kind of categories now. So the clothes that are ready for resale right away, they're in such good shape, all they have to do is be cleaned. We call that reworn. They go right back into one of our standalone, still Green Eileen stores, soon to be changed, or some of our company stores, which are our outlets. Sometimes they need a slight repair, a button, a tear, or whatever, so those are renewed. And then we have 2 other categories, which are much more forward-thinking. So we have our remade clothing, which is really cut up and re-sewn into something new. This is an example of a remade item. So when you buy this dress in particular had a hang tag on it when I first got it, and it said this dress was made from, and it had these little boxes, and it checked off 3 pairs of pants. So it was 1, there's a seam here, 1, 2, 3. And it's limited edition. There were maybe a couple hundred of these made from a pattern that our designers, and I'm going to show you a little video, designed. And then recycled is where we're headed, and that is sort of this idea of circular product. We're investing in an industry collaborative group that is working with a number of innovators, technical innovators, on recycling old product into new thread, new fabric. So really closing the loop. It's very exciting, and it's kind of a wait and see who's going to emerge first with the kind of process that's going to work best for our clothes. And we have, we're creating we call it our tiny factory. It has like 4 employees right now. And it's right there in the same building across the train tracks from our headquarters, where we will be making the remade product and some other product to fill out their workload. It's the first time we will wholly own a factory. Yes?
Is this process profitable for the company, or do you operate it at home?
Oh, yes. So it is somewhat profitable. We have, so I mentioned we've collected 700,000 units over the years, and we have made a total of, I have a number here, $10 million over the years. So it's not hugely profitable, but I think it has potential for being much more profitable. And we're actually working to develop that kind of view, forward-thinking view. What is the profitability potential going forward? We're not sure yet. So I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to silence this. It already is silenced. Excellent. And the reason I silenced it is it's using a Beatles song, and we don't have permission. And this was made for internal use, so you're seeing something we don't usually show outside. That's Eileen's daughter. Oh, never mind. These are the 3 designers from Parsons who came to work with us for a year. 2 are still with us. CFDA, Council on Fashion Designers of America, they had a competition, and the 3 designers won and spent a year with us. So the pop-up shop was in Brooklyn, and it was very successful. And this was just this past summer. So you can imagine, thank you. I had nothing to do with it. But you can imagine having these kind of very rare pieces available. They're not cheap. They're just as costly, I would say, similar price point to our first quality pieces, but they're very unusual. Like I said, limited edition. And we need to expand our customer base. I will admit, our average customer is in her upper 50s and has been there hovering right below 60 for several years now. And so having this new line of clothing that is remade in the USA is going to be one way for us to reach a slightly younger demographic. The Green Eileen, soon to be Fisher Found clothing, already does, because anybody who likes vintage will come in and buy a piece for very much less money than they would had it been brand new. So there's a lot of potential here. Our hope, I don't know if we found the space, but we're opening a real store in Brooklyn that will house the remade product. It'll be later in the summer, as well as some other experimental pieces and first quality. So we're really experimenting with how to reach a wider audience and how to kind of close the loop at the same time and make it a business-worthy endeavor. This was in the New York Times just last week, and I grabbed it because I think, this just represents, this is the wave of the future, and we're all talking about how do we just keep things going around and around without using any more resources. On a separate note, I can't help but mention the recent events, political events, I'll say it. when the election happened, I'd say the vast majority of people close to our company, in our company, Eileen in particular, were very emotional about it. And one of the things, and we have been trying ever since to come up with a strategy that will allow us to have a louder voice around the things we've always already stood for. We have been active in policy for a number of years now. We have taken a stance. We are a women's clothing company. We're 80% women. We're led by a woman. We take a stand on women's issues. We take a stand on climate change issues. We take a stand on minimum wage, on other kinds of workplace benefits, on immigration. These are all things that have always been important to us. And one way in, an organization that we're connected with, which is the American Sustainable Business Council, created this logo very soon after the election and asked its members to put this in their windows. So we have put this logo in the front of all of our windows, our store windows now, as one way to demonstrate that we are a place for everybody. And we want to be a place of inclusion. So that was the first step in. On Inauguration Day, on the 20th, we posted this message on our Facebook page and in other places in social media. It talks about women and girls, human rights, our natural resources, equality, general equality. And this, again, was meant to continue to build up our voice and begin to plant ourselves out there as a thoughtful business that really cares. And I thought I'd share with you some of the responses to this particular posting. So we had many that were very fully supportive. It was incredibly empowering and reassuring. This is somebody who took a more sarcastic view. And then we have those who told us to stay out of politics. And it's true, our customer has means and does come in because she can afford to spend $1,000 or several $1,000s at a moment's notice, and doesn't care necessarily what else we stand for. But we decided we need to stand for these values anyway. It's just too painful for us to watch what's happening in this country. So we're moving forward. And so the question is, in order for us to continue to do the things that are important to us, we need to stay in business ourselves. We need to be a viable business. How do we get our customer to buy the T-shirt on the left when she has a choice of the one on the right that looks fairly similar, may feel fairly similar, and fit fairly similarly? This one will be organic and will come embedded with a lot of those values. I don't know about that one. So that's the challenge we have ahead of us, is how to continue to engage our customers so that we can do the things that we want to do in the world on behalf of not just for our company, but for the apparel industry and for business in general. For us, we use the phrase business as a movement because we see ourselves as a place to try out and perfect things and share them with the wider world so that all of us can move forward together. One of my favorite quotes by one of my favorite authors and thinkers. So that's where I'll call on you first, and if anyone has any other questions. And I don't know how much time we have now.
We have until 4:45. Can you just press the microphone?
Okay. Oh, I talked more than I wanted to.
All right. I think, should be broadcasting live here.
Yeah.
So, of course, we're talking about sustainability, and you showed a pie graph depicting the percentage of manufacturing that happens in different areas of the world.
Yeah.
One being largely in China. And so I was wondering if you could share some of the conversations that you guys may have been having regarding the new administration and the threat of the increased taxes and tariffs from products that may be coming from China. Because I'm assuming that if that was to take place, then that percentage is probably going to change significantly because there won't be any value in it for you to do that. And again, you are a business. So
So you're saying that and making the assumption that we are in China because we save money, when in fact we are in China because it is the single best place for us to get our product made, because the quality is outstanding and superior to any other place we can manufacture, including the US. It is always a shock for people to hear that. So the savings is really minimal and may not even exist when you add in the transportation and the tariffs, et cetera. So one of the things that we are doing, having said that, there is a hope to continue to build up our Made in the USA portfolio a little bit. But the reality is that here in this country, the capacity, the size of the factories, they're really small. It takes a lot of investment. It would take a lot of investment to find a supplier that could meet all of our needs in terms of skill, capacity, quality, et cetera. And we just hired, it's been about 6 months now, a new global sourcing leader who is putting into place a new strategy for us going forward for the next 3 years, which will probably diversify our supply chain a little bit, but not so much. I mean, I don't think this China ratio is going to diminish so much until if and when we can build up the quality and skill that we need elsewhere, and that's not a short-term proposition. Our clothing, as simple as it looks, is quite complicated to make well, and so diversifying is not going to be a simple thing for us. So I think that in the short term, at least the next few years, at least 3 to 5 years, we're still in China for, the majority. Because it would be a danger to us actually to pull away. I think what we would have to do is find other ways to save some money. We are looking at incorporating more lean processes, so really gaining more efficiencies in our processes. And if we can shift things to sea shipment rather than air, which is how the bulk of our clothing comes from China, we'll save a lot of money that way. So there are different ways that we can, put what you're talking about, cover those costs. So that's our strategy for the next 3 to 5 years anyway. Yes.
I have many questions, but I'll try to limit myself to just 2, if
Okay.
that's all right.
Just use the microphone.
Oh, sure, sorry. I think it's on. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay, great.
Press the button.
So, you have to keep it down.
I think because they're recording it.
You just hold it down.
Okay, great. So, I was curious how climate change fits into your sustainability vision, and if you have specific carbon reduction targets as part of your Vision 2020?
Yes, so climate change is huge for us. Right now, our Vision 2020 goals incorporate 20% net reduction in carbon usage in our own facilities, as well as, I believe, as well as in our supply chain. I just want to double check that. The supply chain we have, we're just beginning to ask them to measure things, so it isn't quite as straightforward. The other challenge is we don't own anything even within our own facilities, nor within our supply chain. So we have, it's a little bit of a stretch. We've already, and that's over our 2014 measures. So starting with 2014 as our baseline, looking to have a net decrease of 20% by the year 2020. Same with, you know what, I'm going to just double check. I don't have everything memorized. Right, so yeah, 20% is the goal for carbon. And then we have longer term goals for water. Again, that had not been our focus up until recently, and so right now we're just working to get a baseline measure on our water, and then have a strategy in place over the next couple of years. So we're moving a little more slowly on water. I'm looking for my reading glasses, but does that give you enough of an answer for now?
Yeah.
Okay, I can give you more detail after I can read it with my glasses. Do you want to
I
ask your
was
next
also-
question? Okay.
Yeah, I was curious. You talked about slowing down the supply chain, and I was curious if that also feeds into seasonality and how many times you refresh styles in the store, because obviously this kind of this sense of ceaseless updating in the fashion world very much works against sustainability, sort of, in my mind, acts in direct opposition to it. So I wondered if part of your plan was to also slow down the actual cycle of fashion.
Well, I mean, I don't know that we have the ability ourselves to slow anything down in terms of the big picture, but that's definitely something that comes up in conversation. So what we're talking about is who are the right collaborators in the industry for us to get together with to talk about what are the big impacts we want to have beyond the borders of any of our single companies. That would be one place to look at. Another place would be how we price things, because, you know, as I mentioned before, it's really complex. But influencing the consumer habits, I think, and how we market to consumers and what we expect of them is huge. And that implies convincing other companies that they don't need to be as profitable as they are, right? But yes, it comes into conversation. We don't have any strategies about that yet. First you, and then you. Okay.
Hi, I don't really come from a retail supply chain background, so sorry if this is kind of an ignorant question, but going back to the slide where you were showing the kind of multiplier effects of the pitfalls of trying to achieve the living wage situation. I noticed there was a much more massive jump going to the wholesale distributors and then going to the retailers. I just wonder if there are any strategies that could work to potentially reduce the margin that folks in that section of the supply chain. I think it's like the next slide, actually. Yeah, that one.
To reduce the margin?
Yes, but going from the TMC to the wholesale and the wholesale to the retail, is there any room for vertical integration on the part of Eileen Fisher to address to potentially bring that cost at the retail level down to that $100 range by incorporating some of the wholesale and retail internally?
I think very long term, that's a very long term proposition. Like I said, we don't own any aspect of our supply chain. So right now we're in a place of what are the conversations we need to have? How can we bring our partners along in our supply chain with us? So we're starting with trying to gain transparency into the costing process. We've tried to have that conversation with a couple of our domestic manufacturers, and they've been very forthcoming, and we've been able to actually write down every cost to the penny of every step of the manufacturing process. So we understand where there could be room for, is there a little waste here, or could we save a little money here? What we want to get to is, can we get that from all of our suppliers? And it's actually as more complicated to get it than we realized in the beginning. So once we have that, then, we have to figure out how are we going to shape the model as it exists now. Very long term, what kind of influence can we have on the industry together with other business partners or, brand partners who are willing to have this conversation with us? It's a whole economic model that, we would have to be breaking open. So that's like a Vision 2030 or 2040 or 2050 goal, I'd say. It's not something that we can do really early, but it's definitely, when we talk about like short-term goals and long-term aspirations, I put it out there as a long-term aspiration. So we're headed in that direction. So if you have ideas, we're definitely open. We're looking for ideas. Yeah. And then, we're next. And then, okay.
Unless you guys can stay very much. I know if you have to go.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
So you may have alluded to this in the presentation, but I spent my last summer at the Cradle Products Innovation Institute, and they're talking a lot about identifying critical materials that will sort of further enable closing the loop. Where do you see more work that could be done to sort of enable your capacity to scale up recycling? Is it greater availability of new materials, or sort of changing the way that you produce and design the clothing?
Oh gosh, well there's so many places. First of all, the technology itself in terms of breaking down the fabric hasn't caught up yet, so that's one piece. But yes, designing into it would be tremendous. We have had those conversations internally. What will it take what do our designers need to be able to design into the disassembly, basically, design for disassembly idea. You know, and we're still very much, we just formed an internal circular product team. It's only been 6 months. So I'd say that that kind of thing has been identified as a need to figure out like where are all the leverage points. But we don't have it fully fleshed out yet. We just know that it's, again, so I think we're open. So they're about to engage in a project with the Bard School of Business. They have a program in New York City to help them figure out these long-term strategies and perhaps create a business plan. So I think you're on the cusp. It sounds like what you're talking about is exactly where they are right now. I don't have a lot more to share with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anybody else who wants to talk, I'm here if you want. Oh, yes.
Hi. Well, my background is design, 25 years in the industry, so I'm familiar with a lot of this. I've actually been working on my own upcycling program with Caroline Ledoya.
Oh.
And I was curious about Eileen Fisher's thoughts on the other retailers that are now have take-back programs, especially the fast fashion ones that sort of like are offensive at the same time that they're trying to do good, or at least on the surface. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how to affect consumer attitude and change. If you or if the team thinks that you're going to have to hit some catastrophe in order to make people care enough to spend more, buy less, and be conscious about all of these factors.
Okay, so what was the beginning part?
Curious about Eileen Fisher's, the company's thoughts on.
Oh, I know. Yes. That's two pieces of the question. We are in working groups with those companies. So I'll name them: H&M, Inditex, which has Zara, C&A is, some in there more as a funder. A couple of others, Stella McCartney and the whole, their whole group, which I can't think of the name of. Is it LVMH?
I'm not sure.
Anyway, and so H&M in particular, they put a lot of money into this idea of circular, and they have very audacious goals. And I know this idea of fast fashion is very repulsive, and they are the real thing in terms of investing in it, in circular fashion, and thinking that they're going to figure out how to rebuild their brand so it is entirely circular without, I don't think they have an intention of taking away from the fast fashion model. While it isn't our, the thing that we want to aim for, it's interesting to watch and see if they have success at it. It's a love-hate kind of, relationship, but we have a lot of respect for them and their team. They have very committed people on their team, and we know them very well. So, I think that they're a very important player in this industry, actually, because of what they stand to prove, perhaps, what's possible or what perhaps isn't possible. I don't know. I don't want to be too wishy-washy about it, but we do have a lot of respect for them, yeah. And then the consumer piece?
Yeah, in terms of changing consumer attitudes, I agree with you that the population that regularly affords Eileen Fisher is of means, and that is not most of the population. And convincing the rest of the population to invest in better pieces, buy less, is a very old European concept, but it's like swimming upstream. It's really hard to convince the public that, don't buy 17 t-shirts from Target, buy one that's really great, and it'll last for a long time.
I know. If we knew the answer to that question, we would have done it by now. It is one of our biggest challenges right now is how to engage our customer. It's been, I feel like we've tried a lot of things. Nothing's quite. There's a certain slice of our customer base that is really interested and engaged, and then there's a bigger slice that isn't so much. I think that it's going to come from a lot of places out in the world. It's going to come from a wider and deeper appreciation for the state of the climate and state of the environment, and what we all need to do, not just around fashion, but all of our consumption. You know, I was in the store the other day, a little drugstore near me, that was charging for a shopping bag, and I thought, oh, good, that wasn't there. I mean, they hadn't done that like a month ago. It's a brand new thing. So I feel like those kinds of initiatives, as they build up in all of the retailers around, will help. And maybe legislation is going to be the key at some point. I know, not in the next 4 years, but I wish we knew the answer. But you know, our customers are very intelligent women, and so I feel like we just have to find the right thing that's going to hook them. Shona, who went here, always talks about finding the emotional connection to environment. It's easy to find the emotional connection to the human beings in the supply chain, not so much to a tree or a cloud of smoke or a dirty puddle of water. So we're trying to find that emotional connection through messaging and other kinds of engagement. I like to try to, my whole thing is, I wish we could take our customers on a reality tour of supply chain, because it works for people in the company. Anytime it worked for Eileen, and it has worked for individuals on our various teams who, once they get into the supply chain and they see what's going on, they come back totally changed. And it's like, oh, we have to make this one better, and we have to do this, we have to do that. So that's what works for us. So I'd really like to be able to figure out a way to make that possible for customers, even if it has to be virtual.
I'm almost thinking public service announcements. Partnering with Hollywood.
Yeah.
Really making it graphic.
That would be great too. That would be great. But we can't do that. It has to come from, I think, a third party. Like, there's only so much a brand can do on its own to talk about its own, you know what I mean? So, anything else? Okay, we can. Thank you. I have the information out.